Does some knowledge belong to particular communities of knowers? Welcome to ToK today. My name's Daniel and I wanted to talk a little bit about ToK Exhibition Prompt number 14. Does some knowledge belong to particular communities of knowers? And I wanted to talk a bit about this because I see frequent problems with this prompt from many students that I've been working with from all over the world. I often see a similar problem with this prompt regardless of where the student is from and so on and so on. So there's a sort of common, frequently occurring problem with this prompt. So in this video, I'm going to talk about three things. One, problems or anomalies that are specific to this prompt. Secondly, ways of avoiding or dealing with those problems. And thirdly, wider approaches to answering this particular prompt. Let's kick off with the problems or anomalies that are arising from this prompt. So ToK Exhibition Prompt 14 is a very popular prompt. I see lots of student exhibition commentaries from around the world on this prompt, and I see quite a common problem. The first part of the problem comes from the idea of defining the communities of knowers. Often students will define the community of knowers as an ethnic group or a religious group or a linguistic group, for example, or the community of Asian Americans or the community of Protestant Christians or the community of speakers of Brazilian Portuguese. Now, these are all communities of knowers, but they're very large communities of knowers. There's a lot of diversity of knowledge in such large communities of knowers. As such, it becomes harder to talk about knowledge which may be specific to those groups. Therefore, I recommend that we use more specific communities of knowers, smaller communities of knowers. Now, you can define a community of knower down to much smaller groupings. For example, the students in your year group at school, the students in your ToK class, or even just the students who sit at the same table as you in ToK. These are far more specific communities of knowers. They allow you to develop far more specific claims about knowledge. And once you start to be more specific in the ToK exhibition, you start to get higher marks. It's all good. However, the second part of the problem isn't really about communities of knowers. This prompt is not about communities of knowers. This prompt is whether knowledge belongs to specific communities of knowers. The prompt is about the word belongs. So there needs to be far more focus on the word belongs than on the communities of knowers. Far too often I see commentaries in which students have rewritten the prompt in their head as describe knowledge that belongs to particular communities of knowers. And then their commentary is along the lines of here's a something that belongs to this religious group, and here's a something that belongs to this national group, and here's a something that belongs to this linguistic group. The problem being is that they haven't answered the question, does knowledge belong to specific particular communities of knowers? They've answered a question which is describe some knowledge that might belong to particular communities of knowers. And of course, that's not answering the question, and that means that those commentaries get fairly low marks. So how do we avoid or deal with this problem? Let's move on to part 2, avoiding and dealing with this problem. Well, the first way of dealing with it is to look at smaller communities of knowers, and I'd really recommend picking communities of knowers that you're a member of and that you have a really good understanding of. For example, you could choose a sports team that you belong to, or a caste group such as a drama group. You could choose people that you went on a school trip with, or you could even choose your own family. The more specific the community of knowers are, the easier it will be to write 3 good knowledge arguments. More on that coming up. Secondly, we need to focus on the main question of whether knowledge belongs to a particular community. The most obvious and straightforward way is to argue, first of all, yes it does for object 1, no it doesn't for object 2, and maybe or sometimes for object 3. Now, it's best to have 3 different knowledge arguments, one for each object. The knowledge argument is what in the marking scheme is termed the justification for the inclusion of the object in the exhibition. So having a different justification or knowledge argument for each object will place you in the higher marking bands, or the marking bands of 5 and above. Thirdly, let's now look at some of the wider ways of answering this prompt. The whole prompt revolves around the definition of belong. It doesn't really matter whether you argue that knowledge does or does not belong to a particular community. And it doesn't really matter what that knowledge is. What matters is how you define the concept of belong. Let's quickly have a look at some of the ways in which we could define belong. So, first of all, we could define belong as meaning the knowledge was initially produced by that community of knowers. Therefore, we can argue that knowledge of the Cuban song Los Barbudos belongs to the knowledge community of the original Cuban socialist revolutionaries, because they produced that knowledge. Secondly, we could define the concept of belong as when the meaning of knowledge is defined by a particular community of knowers. So, for example, we could argue that knowledge of hip-hop music does not belong to hip-hop writers and artists, as they do not define the meaning of the genre, but it does belong to the community of the mass media and music marketing companies who do define the meaning of hip-hop music for other knowers. Finally, we could define the concept of belong as representing a community of knowers or assumptions. For example, we could argue that knowledge of Hollywood belongs to the community of knowers of artists, writers, and producers who work in the film and TV industry. They may not actually work in Hollywood, they may not actually work in the United States, nor may they even have access to knowledge of Hollywood. But knowledge of Hollywood represents the knowledge that they do have. Therefore, knowledge of Hollywood belongs to them, according to this argument. Now, if you would like help with this prompt or any of the other ToK exhibition prompts, now you can pick up one of the ToK Today guides to the exhibition prompts. Link in the video description. If you found today's video useful or you've enjoyed it, then I'd love a like and I'd really love a subscribe. Or if you're feeling extra generous, you can buy me a coffee. Thank you so much for watching today. Stay ToKtastic. Hope to see you on the next one. Bye.